Hello everybody. Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah Rutsvita, aka The Woman in Wool, and on this channel we crochet and we talk history. Why? Because true crime and makeup are oversaturated. I'm just kidding. It's because I'm obsessed, and if you're here, so are you. Now, mug of the day. How I identify. Now, on this channel we normally crochet and talk history, but today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be walking you through a project that I recently finished. Sorry, I keep looking at myself in the little screen. It's not great. So I'm going to be walking you through a project that I recently finished. It's, of course, a dress that I made to go to a wedding, but there's a bit of a... Can you hear my dog just chowing down? He's been sitting on the couch all day. I get up to yap at the camera. It's action time. It's time to go. I don't know if any other dog owners have this situation, or specifically dog owning people who do YouTube. I don't know, because like he'll be quiet the entire time. He was like asleep. I could be doing a workout in the living room, which I did today for 30 minutes. You can say congratulations down in the comments if you want to. It's fine. But he did not move a single muscle, and now he's like fucking starving, man. Anyway, I made a wedding dress. I made a wedding guest dress. So here's the situation. I have known about this wedding for a long time. And I've known about the colors, and I know the bride and groom both pretty well. I'd say very well. And I still was late on making this dress. Classic. But this wedding is between two of my very good friends, and they've been together for 10 years. The groom is from Dublin and the bride is from Boston. So we have quite a bit in common with them as well, because my partner is also from Dublin and I'm from New York, which is like Boston, but meaner, I think. I'm just kidding. I love both cities, not equally, but I love them both. And the colors were dark green and dark red, like a Christmas kind of thing, because it was on December 29th. But classic me, I got caught up in all the other projects I was doing this year on trying to make more videos, etc., etc., and I forgot to make the dress. I was telling the bride kind of when I realized that she got engaged, and we were talking about the plans, and they were making plans for the wedding. You know, my partner was going to be a groomsman. She was like, I'd love you to wear the same color as the bridesmaids. So I was like, okay, great. Like, what color is that? She's like, it's a dark green. And I was like, I can do that. I have plenty of time to either find a dark green dress or to make a dark green dress, which would be really perfect because I'm trying to do more making of clothing instead of buying of clothing. So I had plenty of time. I had over like a year and a half. I'm so sorry. It makes me sound like a bad friend. I really did not mean to do this. And I think a New Year's resolution of mine should be to get medicated for ADHD, because I really, really do think that plays a factor in like 90% of how I run my life. Anyway, I get to a little bridal shower kind of party for the bride, which is about a week before the wedding. And the bride turns to me, and we've been talking this whole time and just like never brought it up again. But she turns to me, she goes, "How's the dress coming?" And I go, huh? And then it all came flooding back to me that I had said I was going to make a dress in the same color as the bridesmaids. So I thought to myself, we can make a dress because we've made skirts in small periods of time. And how hard could it be? Just as a reminder, I have had no formal training in sewing, seamstressing, lining, garment making besides knitting and crocheting. Like knitting and crocheting, if I were to knit a dress, that'd be great. Small caveat, I did have a year and a half and now I have 6 days, so knitting something is out of the option. Also, knitting an entire dress would take a long time and it would be very heavy, and I'd have to figure out how to make a sweater dress not casual, which is difficult to do. So sewing it was. And so here's how it started. When I got home that night, I picked out the fabric and I started going through all of the patterns that I had. I have quite a few patterns and I have quite a few dresses, but there was a few things because it was short notice, and since it was really close to Christmas, a lot of the shops were starting to close up. So I was limited as to my materials that I could work with because I couldn't just drop into a haberdashery at any point and get something else. So I had to work with what I had already in my stash. And this is the busiest time of year for Vintage Tea Trips. Vintage Tea Trips is, it's a tour bus, it's food. We have a Christmas menu. We even have like a Christmas lights tour that we bring people on. So this is a very busy time of year that has me working way more than usual. That's just the way it is in hospitality or tourism. There are certain times of year when it peaks and certain times of year when it ebbs and flows and ebbs. But this was a busy time of year for me. The shops were starting to close. I had limited time and limited resources, so I had to work with what I had, and that was really, and the time I had, really. So I realized that I had all of this beautiful blue and green tartan fabric that I thought would be absolutely perfect because it has that dark green. It's slightly different than the bridesmaids because I wanted to separate myself a little bit from the bridesmaids. I didn't want to get confused with them. That's not what the bride wanted, but I wanted the dark green kind of elements that were there. So the dark green and the dark blue fabric was fine. And by the look of it, I think I had enough. And then I realized that it depended on the pattern, on if I had enough. So going back to the pattern, I started looking through all my patterns. I had made skirts before and I really liked the flow of the skirt. I thought that, this one particular skirt pattern could work for what I had in my mind because it had to be long because it's a wedding guest dress. I didn't want like a midi skirt or like a mini skirt, obviously not. So I needed something floor length, and any basic circle skirt could have given me that. I could have also used the same skirt pattern that I used for my Barbie skirt, which would have been fine just without a petticoat, because that skirt pattern is actually much longer than I cut it for the Barbie skirt. The Barbie skirt I cut at around my knees. It did go down to my ankles, but because I was looking for more of a 50s style and a 50s cut, I made it shorter and I put a petticoat underneath it, which gave it that volume. But without the petticoat and without cutting it, it's actually like an ankle length skirt. So I thought about that, and then I found this old pattern that had been sitting around rotting in my stash, and I thought that's perfect. So I needed a floor length skirt, and then the top kind of came into play. I've never made sleeves before. Hi, I'm Hannah, and I've never made sleeves before, and I'm an alcoholic, and I've never made sleeves before. So I didn't actually know if I wanted to make the long sleeves and chance being really bad at it and having it look shit. And then the other thing was I realized I don't have any really long zippers. So when you put on a dress, obviously it goes from kind of the nape of your neck, depending on where the dress hits, the back of your neck here, all the way down to beyond your waist. Because to put a dress on and for it to fit, your waist is going to be, for most people anyway, one of the smaller parts of your body. So for it to fit on your waist, it has to go over your hips, which are wider, or over your shoulders, which are much wider. So that's where a zipper comes in. Normally, you open it up, it becomes nice and wide, you slip it over your body, you zip it back up, and it fits the largest and the smallest points on your body, normally. But I didn't have a long zipper, so the zipper would have gone from the nape of my neck, maybe even just to about halfway down my back, which wasn't going to fit over my shoulders or over my hips to get the dress on. So I had to think of something. Should I do a corseted top? I've never done that before. My friend's wedding is far too risky of an event to chance that on. Do I make a skirt and a top? Do I have enough fabric for that? So I had to figure something out that was probably going to mean the dress was going to have to be backless, because the zipper was really only long enough to put on a skirt rather than a whole dress. So I had to figure that out. So just kind of whittling down my options, I did draw out a couple of patterns that I thought could be feasible, and I wanted to know which one looked the most elegant and most like a wedding guest dress. So obviously I brought it to my straight boyfriend, who has the style of a straight boyfriend. You get it. And I'm not saying that he's not stylish, I'm just saying that maybe evening wear for women is not best reflected off of just a guy.
He's a guy.
Like whatever. So I had a few like ideas knocking around in my head. One with sleeves, one that was armless and backless, very Michelle Obama. Maybe she didn't do backless, actually, mostly just armless. Anyway, but I asked, my partner which one he thought was better, and then also I realized probably I didn't have... And then I realized I probably didn't have enough fabric for 2 sleeves and a full top and a full skirt anyway, so I had to figure that out. But I asked my partner which one he thought was the best kind of drawing for it, and he and I actually agreed on the one that eventually I ended up making. So the skirt ended up being the pattern that I had found deep in the stash, and then the top was something of my own making. And what this entailed was just measuring the waist, my shoulders, and then kind of where I wanted it to be. So marking out kind of different areas. So I knew that the neck was going to be a separate strip. I could sew that onto the top and then tie it in the back. That would look really nice. But the top had to be kind of a semi-diamond with the tips cut up. I'll put it up here. It had to be a certain shape and of certain size. So I made 2 of those, one for the front and one for the back, just to make sure that they were even. And then because I realized that my zipper was not long enough, I did have to make it backless, which worked for the dress. I realized that this may be a little risque, and I also didn't have the undergarments to go under, but I figured we'll figure that out when we get there, some Band-Aids will be fine. So I started cutting, and every kind of sewist or person who makes their own clothing knows, once you start to cut, that's where the terror really comes in. Because you're standing there looking at this beautiful fabric that has so much potential, and you've got this idea, and you go to do it, and you have the scissors, and you're like, what if I fuck it up? You're like, what if I ruin this fabric and then it can't be anything, or it's not as good as what I'm thinking of? And like, that's when the dread starts to come in, when you start to cut away at the fabric. So that's never fun. But I started cutting and sewing all the pieces together. Now, like I said, I'm not very good at this yet, and I haven't taken any classes, and I really should, because my ends are fraying, but the fabric itself is actually very simple to work with. It's just a woven kind of very thin fabric, and it was very agreeable to work with, so it ended up being fine. Thank goodness for that. One issue did come up when I ran out of the black thread that I was using, because the black there was bits and pieces of black throughout the pattern and throughout the fabric, so I was using black thread to sew everything together, and I ran out, and my bottom bobbin ran out like almost immediately, and I was like, oh shit. So I went through all of my thread, and I couldn't find anything that perfectly matched the dark green and the dark blue, so I ended up using this. So it's a little bit more of like a light blue, you can see it in the light there, like a lighter blue, more of a like a dusty blue than what I would have gone for, but it looked decent, and it didn't stand out too much because a lot of the seams were on the inside of the dress instead of the outside, and then the seams that you could see were at the bottom hem of the dress as well, so nobody was going all the way down to the floor, you know what I mean? But that was fine. There was an issue though, and here's me talking about it as it happened. Okay, good news, the dress is nearly done. The dress is nearly done. I have to hem it, and to do that I have to decide what shoes I'm wearing and how high I want my heels to be. So I don't want them to be too high. The whole family, everybody getting married today is quite short, so I don't feel like I'm going to stand out height-wise if I don't wear a high heel, because I want to be fairly comfortable. I also want to look elegant, so I have these little black heels I think I'm going to wear. Bad news is I'm looking at my sewing machine right now, I broke 2 needles on my sewing machine the other day. So I finished everything up. I was just kind of doing like an extra seam along something, and the needle snapped. And so I replaced the needle. I have another one, and that snapped as well. I have more needles, I do, but now I'm scared of breaking all the needles. So the only thing left to do is to trim and hem the bottom of the dress, so this way I'm not tripping all over myself. So I'll choose my heels, we'll try it on, and then we'll hem the bottom of the dress. I might have to hand hem it, which would be a bummer, but I have about an hour and a half train ride, and then the rest of the night. The wedding's tomorrow, by the way. And we're going up to Slane, where it is today, so I have time to hem it. It's just the hem. It literally is just the hem. I'm a little worried that I won't have time. I'm just worried. I could get it done in like 20 minutes with my sewing machine, but it'll take a couple hours with just my hands. So maybe I'll try one more time to hem it on the sewing machine, and then after that, let's find out. So let's try on the dress. We'll go from there. So yes, the needles broke on my sewing machine multiple times. It turns out I was putting them in wrong. I'm looking at my sewing machine here. Betty. Oh, and by the way, my assistant that you see in these videos, her name is Stacy. She is invaluable to the team. She is willing to put up with any hours, which is just fabulous. We love her very much. She's an unpaid intern. The only issue is she's about an inch or two thinner than me on all measurements, so a lot of my stuff ends up fitting Stacy a bit funny, but then once you put it on me, it's fine, because Stacy is she's a lithe young lady, if you know what I mean. She's very fit. But Betty over here is a tricky person to work with. She's a tricky machine to work with. She's not that tricky, and I got her for free, so I can't really complain. But she was breaking all the needles. Turns out I was just putting them in wrong, and she didn't communicate that to me. It's really important on this team that we talk about, that we have an open communication. That's something I value as the business owner in this situation, as your manager. I feel as though that's something you could work on. We'll cover it in our one-to-one. But the needles kept breaking, and I got really scared because it was one day before the wedding. We were leaving that day to go to the venue, so I had limited time to finish the dress. The only thing that needed finishing, though, was I wanted to hem the bottom of the dress. Obviously, I had to take a few inches off because I am short. I know, it's a big secret. When you're on like YouTube and the internet and stuff, some people look tall, some people look short. I feel like I have tall person energy. Like, hello? Like, I have really tall girl energy, but I'm not tall at all. I'm 5'2" in real life. So fitting things is tricky, and I feel like all short people should know how to at least hem pants and skirts fully. They should know that. We should have a class. Like if your parents are under 5'8", we should all have classes on how to hem stuff properly. The tallest person in my family is 5'6". Anyway, I digress. Yeah, so I'm quite short. I have to hem this, so I'm hemming it, and it finally goes. The machine works, and it's just such a relief. I'm like, oh, thank fuck. So now I can just pack the dress instead of putting it in my carry-on. Because another caveat here, we could take the dog with us. It was a dog-friendly venue and a dog-friendly ceremony. They're beautiful. I'm gonna put some images here. He's this beautiful blonde husky. He looks like an albino wolf or something. He's just really the most gorgeous dog. And he's the chillest dog in the whole world. He just sits there. He walked down the aisle. He got handed to my partner. My partner held on to him, and the dog then laid down on the floor and fell asleep for the wedding ceremony. For those of you who know, I have a little Jack Russell, and that's mind-boggling to me. My dog would... Trying to imagine my dog at a wedding ceremony is like, that sound like screaming, crying, throwing up. That would be my dog. My dog would be freaking out. There's 200 people. Who the fuck are these people? What do they want with us? Why aren't we going home? I'm terrified. I'm hungry. Who are you? Ah! That would have been Odie for sure at a wedding ceremony. Oh, hi, bud. You hear your name? But we took the dog with us, and he was pretty good for the train, but then there was also a screaming baby, and any kind of unexpected screaming is going to set him off. So we were like, I was like locked in, right? I was like, you are not going to bark at these children. So I was like there with little treats and stuff, making them do tricks. So I was really locked into the dog during the train ride up. But so I wouldn't have had a chance to hand hem the dress as I would have liked. So I'm really glad that the sewing machine fixed itself, or finally communicated to me what it needed. Betty. But we got to the venue, and we were kind of in there for the night. We had a really great time. We had dinner with the bride and groom's families. They were hanging out. It was just the most lovely thing. It really, really, you count your blessings when you're invited to things like this, or when people bring you into their lives. And it's these moments like weddings or funerals or births or, birthdays, that kind of thing, that make you really thankful for the people that you have. So then the next day came. The bridesmaids all left at like 7 o'clock in the morning to start getting ready, and then the grooms had breakfast at like 9. So because I'm not technically a bridesmaid, I did wake up later and go to breakfast with the groomsmen. Apologies. I'm just not like other girls. Sorry, that's disgusting. No, it's just because I was lazy and my partner was a groomsman, so I went with them. But I joined the groomsmen for some breakfast, and then I went back to the hotel, or the venue there, and I ironed my dress, and it looked really nice once it was all ironed together. I ironed the back dangling pieces. That tie, actually, I realized I haven't explained the tie. The tie, I was thinking of putting buttons on. I didn't have any buttons that were particularly fancy enough, and then in lieu of fancy buttons, I would have taken understated buttons, or almost like invisible buttons, either little black, like circle dots, that kind of thing. Like I would have taken really, anyway, buttons you can't notice, inconspicuous. Jesus Christ. Like, I would have taken like inconspicuous buttons, but like I said, very few shops open, and I was very busy for those few days that I was actually making the dress. So limited resources. So no fancy buttons, no inconspicuous buttons. So I decided that if I had a really long tie in the back, it could go down my back, cover my back a little bit because the dress was backless, and also kind of look really elegant. So I did that, and so I ironed that all out. And when you iron a garment, like when you are sewing, I'm a beginner, and I was kind of, when I first started making things, I didn't iron it. It didn't seem like there was a point to it. It was just kind of annoying. I wanted to get right to the sewing. But then I watched a Bernadette Banner video that said that ironing a garment is what makes it look like a professionally made garment. When you iron out the fabric first, and you cut, and then you sew, and then you iron again, ironing it makes it look professional. It makes it look, it fixes the fit of things. It makes it look very well put together. Like, so once I ironed the dress again, because I ironed the fabric before I sewed it together, but then I ironed it again after it was all sewn together, and it looked really nice. So without further ado, here is some footage of me wearing the dress, so this way you get a full kind of view of what the dress ended up looking like. Now, the feedback I have for myself. I'm going to be pretty harsh on myself, but then again, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I never really have.
I don't know what I'm talking about. And I never have. I never really have.
So I can only give myself so much feedback. Number one would be the fit in the back. Although it fit me very well and hit me in a really good place on my back, it wasn't too low and it wasn't too high. It was really just lovely. It wasn't very tight, and I really wanted to avoid elastic. I had elastic. I just didn't want to put it in because I don't like the way elastic scrunches up the back and just makes it look like, like when you tie a t-shirt with a hairband. And I didn't like the way that would have looked, because then that's what kind of like cheaper dresses have. They'll just have I don't love it. So that's the thing. So I really wanted this to be like kind of couture and a little bit more expensive looking. So I didn't put in any elastic. In order to have combated that, I should have made it a little bit tighter, or I should have made the panels on the skirt in the back a little bit smaller, so this way it hugged my waist just a little bit more. But that would have also made the dress a bit tighter, and because I was going to be moving and eating and drinking and dancing the whole night, I didn't want it to be super tight. So this was kind of, I could have done that, and I think I would have had I had the time, maybe not even the time, like if I really wanted to, but I think it was working well enough that it didn't fit me badly at the waist. I just think it could have been tighter if I wanted it to be. And I think if I was just going to like a cocktail event or whatever, like it wasn't a wedding, then I would have maybe, but I liked the way it fit me. It fell very well. I could have made it tighter in the back to keep that kind of fit going, but I didn't want to risk it being too tight, and I also didn't like the way elastic looked, because it's cheaper looking than making it just fit well. So I could have done that. And then there was the inside of the dress, which is a mess. I don't know how to keep seams neat. I don't know how to do that. I'm just not good enough. I just haven't had the time. I haven't made the time to learn how to do that. And that is something I think in the new year I am going to work on, is to become the best seamstress I can be, and to learn how to like do seams well, add linings, that kind of thing, whatever else that entails, right? Because usually dresses have linings. Dresses have nicer seams that aren't frayed and fuzzy and falling all over the place. So I know this dress isn't going to last long. I think despite the weird frayed edges, the looser than it could have been back, I think it looked very, very nice. Also the hem, I don't know how this happened. I ended up making it shorter in the front and longer in the back slightly. It's not something you would notice immediately, and sometimes it does even look intentional. I know that there are a lot of dresses that are shorter in the front and longer in the back because you kick forward when you walk, and so that's kind of a function thing that some dresses have, and there are dresses that are intentionally shorter in the front and longer in the back. I would have preferred if it was all one length. That was what I was going for. It was a bit of a mistake that happened. I just think I hemmed it in too much of a hurry. I was worried about my sewing machine. I was worried about getting out the door to the train to go to the venue. So I had like 2 hours to hem a dress, and I could have taken the time to slow down a little bit and to make it perfectly even, but I just rushed it and I didn't double check, and now it's shorter in the front, longer in the back. So that is something that I know I can do better. So I will be doing better next time. Obviously, it's just slowing down, taking the time, double checking, that kind of thing. Besides the waistline being quite a little bit wider than normal, and the seams on the inside being frayed, and the hemline, I think it looked good, and it fit the part well, and it did everything it was supposed to. People complimented me on the dress all night, which was really lovely. And sometimes I was like, you're just being nice. But then people who didn't know I made the dress said that they liked the dress. I was like, thanks. And then the bride texted me after saying that her cousins thought I was wearing Dior. So now that's going to inflate my ego for the rest of my life. I've been blown up too much. All the smoke up my ass is gone to my head. Thank you for blowing it there. But I also wore a shawl that I had made years ago. So I made this shawl, I think in like 2020 or 2021. I am forgetting the name of the pattern, but I'll put it here along with the link to buy the pattern down below, because I bought this pattern on Etsy. It's gorgeous. It's this hexagonal pattern with like a swirl of little holes in the middle of it. So it reminds me a lot of the Giant's Causeway in like an artistic, symbolic way. So I was thinking like if I ever did like a crochet mural of the Giant's Causeway, I would use this pattern again and make all those hexagonal squares with the swirl, because the swirl kind of reminds me of the ocean, and the hexagons obviously Giant's Causeway. Anyway, but I made this a shawl years ago, and the yarn I used was Malabrigo Rios in the color you see here, because I'm forgetting the color. But I hooked that together also with a pin I found on Etsy. It's iron. It's like wrought black iron. It looks very like Scottish. It looks almost like a kilt pin, but it is for shawls because it's just that big wrought iron pin. It doesn't pierce through clothing. It just pins it together. So I had this pin, I had the dark blue shawl, I had the blue and green dress, and I took the shawl off because I was a witness at the wedding. I went up and I signed the marriage certificate as a witness, and that's why she wanted me to wear the dark green color as well. So I think that by taking the blue off, the green really shone through. And because I was standing next to another witness who was also wearing dark green, it really showed through. So like I think it worked incredibly well for what it was for, and it was perfect for the wedding, and it looked lovely. For those of you wondering about the bra situation, it was a paper doily I found with masking tape and band-aids. Thank you for asking. Nothing but high fashion here, folks. That's enough looking at my boobs, I think. But I think the dress worked really well for what it was. And then a lot of people asked me this as well. And I think I get this quite a bit when I go to like formal events, or when I go to other people's kind of events. They say, why aren't you wearing vintage? Why aren't you with your hair curled and the vintage and the A-line dresses? And why aren't you wearing full vintage for like a formal event? And the answer is very kind of simple. Sometimes, and I don't mean this to be rude to anybody who does wear vintage all the time, I don't wear vintage in certain situations because in certain situations it's not appropriate to make a show of yourself. For example, somebody else's wedding, the star of the show is the bride and the groom, and when you're head to toe in 1950s formal evening wear looking like Audrey Hepburn, no matter what color you're wearing, people are gonna notice you and they're gonna ask you questions, and it'll take some attention away from the bride and groom. It's not appropriate to wear full vintage at all situations because I don't want to be the star of that situation. And although I'm not saying that wearing vintage would make me the center of attention and take attention away from the whatever, it does add an extra weirdness or like an extra thing to think about and talk about the wedding besides the wedding itself. So I don't want to be not even like taking attention away because it makes me sound like an asshole. Like, oh, they're all gonna be looking at me. Not always. But you know, like at somebody else's birthday party, at somebody else's wedding, at a funeral, you know, I'm not gonna be like, this little dumba's from 1953. So like at some points it is not appropriate to be wearing full vintage. On my own YouTube channel, good to go. At my own birthday party, no problem. Maybe if I get married someday, I'll wear full vintage, whatever, you know, like, but it's when I don't want to be a feature of the wedding. You know, I didn't want to be a feature of this wedding. Like, oh, then there was that girl who was wearing fucking 50s gear. I wanted to blend in with the people who the bride wanted me to blend in with. I wanted to be on brand for the wedding, and I wanted to look nice and be happy for my friends. And that's it. I did not want to be a feature in this wedding, like, and the vintage girl was there for some fucking reason. So now you know. So like if you see me out and about in the street, I'm either wearing vintage because I got nothing on, or I'm just going to dinner, or I'm hanging out, or I'm not because the situation doesn't call for it, or I'm at work. And you can catch me at work at the Vintage Tea Trips. Code womaninwool for 10% off of your vintage tea trip. This whole thing was just a long form ad. But yeah, that was my little excursion into sewing. I was really quite happy with it in the long run. I really did love the dress. I still have it. I'm not sure when or where I will wear it again, but you know, the future is out there. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Like and subscribe immediately because I work hard on these videos and I like you. I really like you. I hope that's okay. Anyway, like, subscribe, follow me on all the platforms at womaninwool, shop my Etsy page at Savita Designer, and I'll see you next time. I don't know what to say at the end of these videos, and I'll see you in the next video. I'm gonna do the Irish goodbye, the Irish phone goodbye. Bye, 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 bye. 1 second, I'm gonna put my dog on the couch. At one shoulder, are you okay? Here, tell you what. Do you want to be in the video? No. Fitting over my the big Irish head on me. Make the back open. Jeez, my hair is weird.